Welcome back, subscribers and alike. I've been an AT&T customer for most of my life. Sure, I switched to Sprint for cell phone and eventually dropped the landline, but I continued with them for internet service. Overall, I've been very pleased with their performance and reliability. When I moved away from the big city to the woods, I discovered a much slower Uverse. With download speeds of 13 megabits per second and uploads of 2.1, it was difficult to telecommute, especially when working with video files. Eventually, I got cable internet from Optimum, which was much faster. I kept the Uverse for home Wi-Fi service, but recently AT&T increased their service fee by $20 with no improvement in service and no promise of ever getting fiber in my area. So even though Uverse is more reliable than cable internet, especially in our outage-prone area, I decided to drop AT&T. With the departure of the AT&T modem and router, I needed to go from 2 internet networks to 1. I could not just simply enable Wi-Fi on the cable LinkSys router because it's in a very poor location. This meant replacing the AT modem router with another LinkSys and connecting the 2 routers together. My plan is to take the Ethernet connection from the cable router, which does not have Wi-Fi enabled, and which I will now call router 1, and run an Ethernet cable all the way to where the AT&T router sits, which I will now call router 2. Before we start, let's take a look at the backside of both the AT&T Uverse modem router and just a typical router. With the Uverse, you have a port that's called broadband, and that brings in their service. The modem here converts, then it has router output here, and they call it Ethernet, but this is your LAN, your local area network. 4 ports typically. On a router only, you're going to be fed by a modem to the WAN port. This is the wide area network, the internet. And then again, you'll have typically 4 outputs. Ethernet outputs, also known as your LAN, local area network. You may have other things like a USB port. In some cases, they're power only. Sometimes they'll connect to external devices like a printer or storage. So while we typically make our connection through the WAN port to distribute out via the LAN ports, you could also connect into a LAN port and then distribute via the 3 other ports, thereby bypassing this WAN port. In adding a second router to our system, we're going to bypass this WAN port and come into the LAN port with our internet connection from router 1 and then distribute out on the other 3 ports. By doing this, I maintain one network with router 1 handling all the IP address requests. However, there are 2 issues with this. 1, router 2 also wants to fulfill IP requests, so I will have to disable that. And I wanted to maintain the network names from the AT&T modem router, so things like my stove, fridge, lights, TV, DVR, Echo, receiver, Roku, etc.,
I didn't catch the other thing you said.
Don't have to be reset to a new network name. It's much easier to set the network names and passwords to match what all the devices are looking at than to configure each device individually. We're going to take the LinkSys, plug it into a computer so we can update its software, and also so that we can reconfigure the names of the Wi-Fi radios so that they match the convention for all the Wi-Fi devices that are in the home. Now we take our router, plug it in, turn the power on, take the Ethernet cord and plug it into any of the LAN ports. Those are 1, 2, 3, 4, not the WAN or internet port. Plug that into your computer or laptop. By the way, if you're using a computer that has Wi-Fi, you'll want to switch the Wi-Fi off. And now we dial in 192.168.1.1, enter. And that shows us our LinkSys operating system, so we're into the computer. You could also try myrouter.local, and that will also get you into the router. We have to agree to the terms of the license agreement. The next screen tells us that we do not have Ethernet connected to the internet, which is fine, so we'll just exit. And it's warning us that the wizard has not completely set up, and we tell it not to do that. We don't want the wizard running right now. When it asks for the password, we type in admin. Once you've typed in the password and you're into the router, you're brought to this status page, and you can either click router or configuration. In configuration, you can change the IP address. We want to change the IP address because remember, this is router number 2. And the only difference between router number 1 and number 2 is at the moment, they both have the same IP address, which is this 192.168.1.1. So I have to make this one .2 to avoid any conflicts between the two routers. You can also rename the router if you'd like, so you can give it a different name. And very important is to turn off the DHCP server, because that's what serves up the IP address to whatever device wants to get out into the internet. So what we want to do there is just turn that off, because if router number 2 is generating an IP address and router number 1 is generating an IP address, there could be a conflict between the two routers, and it could cause problems, could even slow down your system. I'm not saying it won't work if you don't check this off, but it will cause problems down in the future at some point for you. So it's better to turn off and only have one router generating the DHCP for you. And then finally, after making those changes, we got to do the most important thing, and that is we want to save our changes. Because if you just go to another page on here, it'll forget everything you've done. Now, on the left-hand column, we go over to Wi-Fi, and what we want to do here is we want to change the name of the network name for both the 5G and the 2.4G. Remember, I'm matching those names to what my AT&T modem router had. So that's what I will change them to now. After changing the names for both of the radios, we hit the save button. Once the save function has concluded, we go over to wireless security, and here we change the passphrase or password for the 5G and the 2.4G radios. Again, once you've entered those two passwords, you hit save. After that, we go over to guest access, and if you want to allow guests onto your Wi-Fi, then you enable that function by clicking this button, and then you can assign a password for your guest to type in to get into it. Once you're done with guest, you want to go down to administration, and there you'll go to the subheading of time zone and pick whatever time zone you are in, and then select whether you want it to automatically compensate for daylight savings time. When you're done with time zone, come up to password, and now you get to change the password for the router. You can leave it at the default, which is admin, which is really silly. So you want to make it something that someone else can't figure out and get into your system and make changes to your router. And once you change the password, of course, make sure to save. And then the system will take you out, and you'll have to enter that new password that you just created. Now we're ready to take our LinkSys and replace the old AT&T modem router. We're going to disconnect everything off the Uverse router. We're going to take the cable that comes all the way from router 1, goes underneath the floor, and I'm going to plug it in to one of the LAN ports on router 2, not the WAN port. We've disconnected everything from this. We can get rid of the Uverse. I've connected power. I've plugged in a USB, and it's not storage, it's actually the Roku that goes into the receiver. So I'm hoping that gets power. And then I'm going to take a feed from any of the LAN ports here, and I'm going to take it over to a switch. And what the switch enables me to do is to split up my internet connection to several more devices. Incoming, going into the LAN, we turn on the power. I have an outgoing from the LAN going over to my switch. Lights come on. And now give it a few moments and hopefully we should have both Wi-Fi and Ethernet connection throughout the house. And you'll notice there's an indication that there is no internet, and that's because we're not using the WAN port. Now we verify that the wireless is working. Alexa, what time is it?
It's 4:46 p.m.
Success. Alexa, what time is it?
It's 4:47 p.m.
Make sure to allow a little bit of time for your appliances to reconnect. This refrigerator connects via Wi-Fi, and as we see, the connection is made and we didn't have to program anything. That's because we repurposed the name from the old Uverse router. We switch on the TV, we go to Samsung TV Plus, which is all internet channels. As you can see, Ethernet and Wi-Fi are working flawlessly. So basically we kept all the settings from the Uverse, we just transferred them over to the LinkSys, and all the devices think they're connecting to the AT&T because it's the same passwords and configurations. Saves you a lot of time from having to reconfigure all your devices. Is there a downside to this approach? Well, you only get 3 LAN ports that you can use because your 4th one has the internet coming into the router. And you'll always see that flashing yellow light telling you that there's no internet connection. Of course, you could just tape that over if you'd like. And now for a quick, very basic look at IP addresses. Your modem router and your router will need to connect to the outside world via the internet provided by your service provider. They assign you an IP address. But now all your devices inside your home network also need an IP address so they can connect out. And that's what the DHCP on your router does. It has a pool of addresses, and from that pool, it assigns a unique address to every device in your home that's trying to connect out to the internet or trying to talk to the devices on your home network. The last 3 digits of your IP address will change for each device on your network. If you found this video interesting or useful, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, join the subscription team, and as always, thank you ever so much for watching.